evening and welcome to Sun Middle Temple. We are so happy you've joined us. My name is Alba and I use she, her pronouns. This is our second January observance and our second observance of 2026, and I'm so happy you are here. As always, the service is recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. Please remember to fill out our time and book survey. In addition, sign up for our new event, the Wax Museum, and participate in our ongoing pentagram community art piece. If you remember also, I am currently at my parents' house and my mic quality is different due to that. So it will be different. This is should be the last time where it's different, and then we should go back to our regular settings next month. So please listen as I read the words aloud, or read the opening words aloud, or read them aloud along with me. We welcome you into the light of the gods and light this flame in celebration. May its brightness symbolize our connection to the gods and the natural world. May you join us in this community of faith, cherishing love, and with open hearts. So our theme for this month is greed, and if you remember, it's kind of a continuation of last month's theme about wealth. And our readings today are the other half of Critias by Plato, translated by Benjamin Jowett. Remember that Critias is a fragment that ends in the middle of a sentence. So when we finish part 2 today, I will quite literally cut off in the middle of a sentence. But then we will also read the summary of the story given by Plato in Timaeus, also translated by Benjamin Jowett. So we will pick up with Critias. And if you remember, we spent the last time describing the physical palace of Atlantis. It was pages of describing the palace of Atlantis. Leaving the palace and passing out across the 3 harbors, you came to a wall which began at the sea and went all around. This was everywhere distant 50 stadia from the largest zone or harbor, and enclosed the whole, the ends meeting at the mouth of the channel which led to the sea. The entire area was densely crowded with habitations, and the canal and the largest of the harbors were full of vessels and merchants coming from all parts, who, from their numbers, kept a multitudinous sound of human voices and a din and clatter of all sorts night and day. I have described the city and the environs of the ancient palace nearly in the words of Solon, and now I must endeavor to represent to you the nature and arrangement of the rest of the land. The whole country was, said by him, to be very lofty and precipitous on the side of the sea, but the country immediately about and surrounding the city was a plain level, itself surrounded by mountains which descended towards the sea. It was smooth and even, of an oblong shape, extending in one direction 3,000 stadia, but across the center island it was 2,000 stadia. This part of the island looked towards the south and was sheltered from the north. The surrounding mountains were celebrated for their number and size and beauty, far beyond any which exist, having in them also many wealthy villages of country folk, and rivers and lakes and meadows, supplying food enough for every animal, wild or tame, and much wood of various sorts, abundant for each and every kind of work. I will now describe the plain, as it was fashioned by nature and by the labors of many generations of kings through long ages. It was for the most part rectangular and oblong, and where falling out of the straight line followed the circular ditch. The depth and width and length of this ditch were incredible. It gave the impression that a work of such extent, in addition to so many others, could never have been artificial. Nevertheless, I must say what has been told. It was excavated to the depth of 100 feet, and its breadth was a stadium everywhere. It was carried around the whole of the plain, and was 10,000 stadia in length. It received streams which from the mountains, and winding round the plain, and meeting at the city, was there led off into the sea. Further inland likewise, straight canals of 100 feet in width were cut from it through the plain, and again led off into the ditch leading to the sea. These canals were at intervals of 100 stadia, and by them they brought down the wood from the mountains to the city, and conveyed the fruits of the earth in ships, cutting traverse passages from one canal into another, and to the city. Twice in the year they gathered the fruits of the earth, in winter having the benefit of the rains of heaven, and in summer the water which the land supplied by introducing the streams from the canals. As to the population, each of the lots in the plain had to find a leader for the men who were fit for military service, and the size of a lot was a square of 10 stadia each way, and the total number of all the lots was 60,000. And of the inhabitants of the mountains, and of the rest of the country, there was also a vast multitude, which was distributed among the lots, and had leaders assigned to them according to their districts and villages. The leader was required to furnish for the war the sixth portion of a war chariot, so as to make up a total of 10,000 chariots, also 2 horses and riders for them, a pair of chariot horses without a seat, accompanied by a horseman who could fight on foot, carrying a small shield, and having a charioteer who stood behind the men-at-arms to guide the 2 horses. Also, he was bound to furnish 2 heavy-armed soldiers, 2 archers, 2 slingers, 3 stone shooters, and 3 javelin men, who were light-armed, and 4 sailors to make up the complement of 1,200 ships. Such was the military order of the royal city. The order of the other 9 governments varied, and it would be wearisome to recount their several differences. As to offices and honors, the following was the arrangement from the first. Each of the 10 kings in his own division, and in his own city had the absolute control of the citizens, and in most cases of the laws, punishing and slaying whomsoever he would. Now the order of precedence among them and their mutual relations were regulated by the commands of Poseidon, which the law had handed down. These were inscribed by the first king on a pillar of the Orchalim, which was situated in the middle of the island at the temple of Poseidon, whither the kings were gathered together every 5th and every 6th year alternately, thus giving equal honor to the odd and even number. And when they were gathered together, they consulted about their common interests, inquired if anyone had transgressed in anything, and passed judgment, and before they passed judgment, they gave the pledges to one another on this wise. There were bulls who had the range of the temple of Poseidon, and the 10 kings being left alone in the temple, after they had offered prayers to the god, they might capture the victim which was unacceptable to him, hunted the bulls without weapons, and but with staves and nooses. And the bull which they caught, they led up to the pillar and cut its throat over the top, so that the blood fell upon the sacred inscription. Now on the pillar, besides the laws, there was inscribed an oath, invoking mighty curses on the disobedient. When therefore, after slaying the bull in the accustomed manner, they had burnt its limbs, they filled a bowl of wine and cast in a cloth them. The rest of the victim they put in the fire, after having purified the column all around. Then they drew from the bowl in golden cups, and pouring a libation on the fire, they swore that they would judge according to the laws in the pillar, and would punish him who in any point had transgressed them, and that for the future they would not, if they could help, offend any writing on the pillar, and would neither command others nor obey any ruler who commands them to act otherwise than according to the laws of their father Poseidon. This was the prayer which each of them offered up for himself and for his descendants, at the same time drinking and dedicating the cup out of which he drank in the temple of the god. And after they had supped and satisfied their needs, when darkness came on, and the fire about the sacrifice was cool, all of them put on the most beautiful azure robes, and sitting on the ground at night, over the embers of the sacrifices by which they had sworn, and extinguishing all the fire about the temple, they received and gave judgment. If any of them had an accusation to bring against any one, and when they had given judgment, at daybreak they wrote down the sentences on a golden tablet, and dedicated it together with their robes to be a memorial. There were many special laws affecting the several kings inscribed about the temples, but the most important was the following. They were not to take up arms against one another, and they were all to come to the rescue if any one of their cities attempted to overthrow the royal house like their ancestors. They were to deliberate in common about war and other matters, even the supremacist descendants of Atlas, and the king was not to have the power of life and death over any of his kinsmen, unless he had the assent of the majority of the 10. Such was the vast power which the gods settled in the lost island of Atlantis, and this he afterwards directed against our land for the following reasons, as tradition tells. For many generations, as long as the divine nature lasted in them, they were obedient to the laws and well affection towards the god, whose seed they were, for they possessed true and in every way great spirits, uniting gentleness with wisdom in the various chances of life, and in their intercourse with one another. They despised everything but virtue, caring little for their present state of life, and thinking lightly of the possession of gold and other property which seemed only a burden to them. Neither were they intoxicated by luxury, nor did wealth deprive them of their self-control, but they were sober and saw clearly that all these goods are increased by virtue and friendship with one another, whereas by too great regard and respect for them, they are lost and ship with them. But such reflections, and by the continuance in them of a divine nature, the qualities which we have described grew and increased among them. When the divine portion began to fade away, it became diluted too often and too much with the mortal admixture, and the human nature got the upper hand. They then, being unable to bear their fortune, behaved unseemly, and to him who had an eye to see, grew visibly debased, for they were losing the fairest of their precious gifts. But to those who had no eye to see true happiness, they appeared glorious and blessed at the very time when they were full of avarice and unrighteous power. Zeus, the god of gods, who rules according to law, and is able to see into such things, perceiving an honorable race was in woeful plight, and wanting to inflict punishment on them, that they might be chastened and improve, collected all the gods into their most holy habitation, which being placed at the center of the world, beholds all created things, and when he had called them forth together, he spake as follows. And unfortunately, that is the end of Critias. We have no idea what Zeus said, or what the rest of this is. However, we have a summary of this story from another work of Plato called Timaeus. So now this section is the summary of this story, and this should be the full summary of this story. So I will now read this portion, and hopefully we'll be able to finish the whole of the story. I will tell an old world story, which I heard from an aged man, for Critias at the time of telling it was, as he said, nearly 90 years of age, and I was about 10. Now the day was that day of Apaturia, which is called the registration of youth, at which, according to customs, our parents give prizes for recitations, and the poems of several poets were recited by us boys, and many of us sang the poems of Solon, which at that time had not gone out of fashion. One of our tribe, either because he thought so, or to please Critias, said that his judgment Solon was not only the wisest of men, but also the noblest of poets. The old man, as I very well remember, brightened up at hearing this, and said, smiling, Yes, Amiander, if Solon had only, like other poets, made poetry the business of his life, and had completed the tale which he brought with him from Egypt, and had not been compelled by reason of the factions and troubles which he found stirring in his own country, when he came home to attend to other matters, in my opinion, he would have been as famous as Homer or Hesiod or any poet. And what was the tale about, Critias? Asked Amiander. About the greatest action which the Athenians ever did, and which ought to have been the most famous, but through lapse of time and the destruction of actors it has not come down to us. Tell us, said the other, the whole story, and how and from whom Solon heard this veritable tradition. He replied, In the Egyptian delta, at the head of which the river Nile divides, there was a certain district, which is called the district of Sais, and in this great city of the district is also called Sais, and is the city from which the king Amasis came. The citizens have a deity in their foundress. She is called in the Egyptian tongue Neith, and is asserted by them to be the same as who the Hellenists call Athene. They are great lovers of the Athenians, and say that they are in some way related to them. To this city came Solon, and was received there with great honor. He asked the priests who were most skillful in such matters about antiquity, and made the discovery that neither he nor any Hellene knew anything worth mentioning about the times of old. On one occasion, wishing to draw them on to speak of antiquity, he began to tell about our most ancient things in our part of the world, about Pharonius, who was called the first man, about Niobe, and after the deluge, and the survival of Decalulion and Pheera, and he traced the genealogy of their descendants, and reckoning up the dates, tried to compute how many years ago the events of which he was speaking happened. Thereupon one of the priests, who was of very great age, said, O Solon, Solon, you Hellenes are never anything but children, and there is not an old man among you. Solon in return asked him what he meant. I mean to say, he replied, that in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. And I will tell you why. There have been, and there will be, many destructions of mankind, arising out of many causes. The greatest have been brought about by the agencies of fire and water, and other lesser ones by innumerable other causes. There is a story which even you have preserved, that once upon a time Phaethon, the son of Helios, having yoked the steeds in his father's chariot because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth, and was himself destroyed by a thunderbolt. Now this has the form of a myth, but really signifies a declination of the bodies moving in the heavens around the earth, and a great conflagration of things upon the earth, which occurs after long intervals. At such times those who live upon the mountains and in dry and lofty places are more liable to destruction than those who dwell by rivers or on the seashore. And from this our calamity the Nile, who is our never-failing Saviour, delivers and preserves us. When, on the other hand, the gods purge the earth with a deluge of water, the survivors in your country are herdsmen and shepherds who dwell on the mountains. But those who, like you, live in cities are carried by the rivers into the sea. Whereas in this land, neither then nor at any other time does the water come down from above on the fields, having always a tendency to come up from below, for which reason the traditions that are preserved here are the most ancient. The fact is that whatever the extremity of winter frost or of summer sun, does not prevent mankind exists, sometimes in greater, sometimes lesser numbers. And whatever happens in either your country or in ours, or in any other region, are informed, if there were to be any actions noble or great in any other way, or in any other way remarkable, they have been written down by us of old and are preserved in our temples. Whereas just when you and other nations are beginning to be provided with letters and the other requisites of civilized life, after the usual interval, the stream from heaven, like a pestilence, comes pouring down and leaves only those of you who are destitute of letters and education. And so you have to begin all over again like children, and know nothing of what happened in ancient times, either among us or among yourselves. As for you, for those genealogies of yours which you just now recounted to us, Solon, they are no better than the tales of children. In the first place, you only remember a single deluge, but there were many previous ones. In the next place, you do not know that there formerly dwelt in your land the fairest and noblest race of men who had ever lived, and that you and your whole city are descended from a small seed or remnants of them which survived. And this is unknown to you, because for many generations the survivors of that destruction died, leaving no written word. For there was a time, Solon, before the great deluge of all, when the city which was now Athens was first and bore, and in every way the best governed of all cities, is said to have been performed the noblest deeds, and to have had the fairest constitution of any of which tradition tells under the face of heaven. Solon marveled at his words, and earnestly requested the priest to inform him exactly and in order about these former citizens. You are welcome to hear about them, Solon, said the priest, both for your own sake and for that of your city, and above all, for the sake of the goddess, who is the common patron and parent and educator of both our cities. She founded your city 1,000 years before ours for the foundation of Athens and for the repulse of the invasion of Atlantis, receiving from Earth and Hephaestus the seed of your race, and afterwards she founded ours, of which the constitution is recorded in our sacred registers to be about 8,000 years old. As touching your citizens of 9,000 years ago, I will briefly inform you of their laws, and of their most famous action. The exact particulars of the whole we will hereafter go through at our leisure in the sacred registers themselves. If you compare these very laws with ours, you will find that many of ours are the counterpart of yours, as they were in olden times. In the first place, there is the caste of priests which is separated from all others. Next there are the artificers, who ply their several crafts by themselves and do not intermix. And also there is the class of shepherds, and of hunters, and as well as that of husbandmen. And you will observe too that the warriors in Egypt are distinct from all the other classes, and are commanded by the law to devote themselves solely to military pursuits. Moreover, the weapons which they carry are shields and spears, a style of equipment which the goddess taught of the Asiatics first to us, as in your part of the world first to you. Then, as to wisdom, do you observe how our law from the very first made a study of the whole order of things, extending even to prophecy and medicine, which gives health out of these divine elements, deriving what was needed for human life, and adding every sort of knowledge which was akin to them, all in this order and arrangement the goddess first imparted to you when establishing your city. And she chose the spot of earth in which you were born, because she saw that the happy temperament of the seasons in that land would produce the wisest of men. Wherefore the goddess, who was lover of both war and of wisdom, selected and first of all settled the spot which was most likely to produce men like as herself. dwelt, having such laws as these, and still better ones, and excelled all mankind in virtue, as became the children and the disciples of the God. Good evening and welcome to Sun Meadow Town.
Many great and wonderful deeds are recorded of your state in our histories, but one of them exceeds all the rest in greatness and valor. For these histories tell of a mighty power which unprovoked made an expedition against the whole of Europe and Asia, and to which your city put an end. This power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean, for in those days the Atlantic was navigable, and there was an island situated in front of the straits which are by you called the Pillars of Heracles. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together, and was the way to other islands, and from these you might pass to the whole of the opposite continent which surrounded the true ocean. For this sea which is in the Straits of Heracles is only a harbor, having a narrow entrance, but the other is a real sea, and the surrounding land may be most truly called a boundless continent. Now in this island of Atlantis there was a great and wonderful empire, which had rule over the whole island and several others, and over parts of the continent, and furthermore, the men of Atlantis had subjected the parts of Libya within the columns of Heracles as far as Egypt, and of Europe as far as Tarhenia. This vast power, gathered into one, endeavored to subdue at a blow our country and yours, and the whole of the region within the straits. And then, Solon, your country shone forth in the excellence and of her virtue and strength among all mankind. She was preeminent in courage and military skill, and was the leader of the Hellenists. And when the rest fell off from her, being compelled to stand alone, after having undergone the extremity of danger, she defeated and triumphed over the invaders, and preserved from slavery those who were not yet subjugated, and generously liberated all the rest of us who dwell within the pillars. But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea. For which reason the sea in those parts is impassable and impenetrable, because there is a shoal of mud in the way, and this was caused by the subsidence of the island. So that is the end of our readings for today. And if you didn't notice, the theme was greed, and Atlantis is one of the stories that we've read in the past couple days, past 2 months about wealth and greed. And it sinks because the men are greedy and try to conquer and enslave the rest of the world. Because these readings were so long for this chunk and I had to split it into two, we will be skipping more of the discussion portion of this observance, but I will still move on and play the ritual video.
We leave this offering for our gods to symbolize our connection and devotion. We gift this rock to symbolize the stability of the gods in our world. We gift this water to accept the flow of our lives. We welcome life and bless our offerings with oil to share our riches. We embrace our connection to each other and the world and celebrate our revival.
We will now move into our closing words, which will appear on the slide behind you. As we move out into the world, let us remember our community of faith. Cherish love and open your heart as you walk through life. Hold dear the light of the gods and our connection with the natural world. Go forth in celebration and carry the light of connection within your heart.